Want unbreakable ransomware protection while cutting storage costs in half or more? Myota's patented technology encrypts, shards, and spreads your data across multiple locations, guaranteeing security and recovery against cyber attacks. Try it free at myota.io. That's myota.io. Welcome back to another episode of Data Protection Gumbo. I'm Demetrius, and today we have a great episode lined up with Peter Bonney, who is the CEO and founder of Fastbreak RFP. What exactly does that mean? What is an RFP? You should know what an RFP is because that means that you are getting some money very soon if you do get that RFP. But I'm bringing Peter on because we're going to have a very insightful conversation around open source to APIs and some of the critical decisions behind software as a service architecture. And so I'd like to welcome Peter to the Gumbo today. How are you, Peter?
I'm doing great, Demetrius. Thanks for having me on.
So tell us a little about Fast Break RFP and maybe a short story how this all came about.
Yeah, sure. And by the way, I love your description of why you should be excited about receiving an RFP. I'm going to steal that actually RFPs aren't they're an opportunity, but it's true. So yeah, so for those who don't know, RFP stands for Request for Proposal, and basically they are pretty repetitive business documents that buyers ask. A buyer issues an RFP, which means they're requesting a seller to give them a proposal. And sometimes that proposal is going to be kind of an open-ended document, or sometimes it's going to be completing a big questionnaire. And it's very painful. I've seen questionnaires, and not joking, as long as 2,500 questions, very, very time consuming to complete. And mostly they contain content that the company has answered countless times in the past. So it's very time consuming, very repetitive, and is honestly mostly just kind of check the box stuff. So anyway, so what FastBreak
Yeah.
does is it automates the process of completing those documents using AI and your existing content. The story of how we started it is so this is startup number two. Startup number one was called Vendorful
Mm-hmm.
and was focused on supplier management, vendor management, and kind of the procurement side of these sorts of deals where, the buyer would be asking sellers for information. They'd use our solution for doing that. And because we're selling to procurement and selling to big companies, we would respond to RFPs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got frustrated with that. And one day, like post ChatGPT, I asked one of our engineers, like, "Hey, can we build a tool just to help us answer these questions?" I remember the RFP. It was like it wasn't even that big. It was like 150 questions, which is not big as these things go.
Yeah.
But it just I was just tired of it. And anyway, so we built a little internal project to see if we could answer our own RFPs,
Mm-hmm.
and we could. And we said, "Oh, this is actually really cool." And so we spun that out into its own project and exited the first business, and now we're focusing on the RFP response side.
Is there anyone else in this business just centered around the AIification of RFPs? Is it just you guys? Like, this is a super duper niche that you're talking about here.
You know, you would think that, like, oh, this is like a small thing, and so, who else could be doing this? There's actually a lot of companies doing it, and it seems like a new one pops up every couple weeks.
But is
I
that the main business though, or is that just maybe one of the solutions or products that they have?
Well, so there are a couple of big companies that are focused on this. Maybe not with they're sort of pre-generative AI. Those two big
Okay.
players called
Mm-hmm.
Loopio and Responsive. They've been around for maybe 10 years. That's kind of like generation one of RFP response. And then generation two, companies like us, kind of post ChatGPT, post large language model. There are actually a lot. It's mostly greenfield. I honestly, I actually don't encounter those other companies much when we're talking to new prospects, just because there are so many companies out there that don't have anything like this. And the other thing is that it seems like we are all kind of focusing on different sub niches, and maybe they will merge over time and we'll all end up doing the same stuff. But there are companies that are very, very focused on like government style RFPs. It's not our focus. And there are a number of really good solutions there. There are ones that are kind of more focusing on information security questionnaires, some that are very, very
Okay.
focused on tech companies as customers, some that are more like us that are more focused on sort of non-tech companies, kind of let's call it like old line industrials, financial services, things
Hmm.
where maybe the problems are a little bit different. They're much more about like managing personnel and managing workflows than about like, specific integrations and things like that.
Yeah.
So, for now, it seems like there's enough opportunity out there for all of us to coexist.
Okay. Great. I appreciate you sharing that. And if you think about an RFP, is
Yeah.
that primarily what teams should be interested in this? Is this just the sales team, the CFO, and all the cronies behind the CFO, and maybe the legal team, right? Who are you selling to?
Okay. So the people who are most excited about this, like our champions or our biggest users, it depends on the company. If you're talking about a non-tech company, if it's a big organization, they're typically going to have a proposal team or actually responsible. It's like their day job to complete these questionnaires. Now, their job ends up touching dozens or sometimes hundreds of other people in the organization, the subject matter experts who can actually answer kind of the novel questions and provide feedback and review everything before it goes out. The thing with those people is this is not their day job, right? Answering an RFP, if you are in like, I don't know, let's say you're at a health insurance company, if you're in the claims department, you've got to answer about, a question about claims on an RFP, that's not your job, right? This is the distraction from what they're actually paying you
Yeah.
for. So from that perspective, the CFO is very interested in this kind of technology because they want to see their salary being allocated where it needs to be, and like that people are not sort of spending their time doing things that they're not getting paid for, or are causing increased risk or things balls to get dropped because they're not focused on the right stuff. But the real drivers are like the revenue teams because it's accelerating deals, it's making it easier for their team to operate, it's making it easier for them to bid on business. And so those are our core users. It's the
Mm.
revenue teams.
And can you maybe share some of the key challenges that you faced just in balancing? So when you were building,
Yep.
you went to your team and you said, "Hey, we're getting an awful lot of RFPs. Can we
Yep.
automate this, right?"
Yep.
What were some of the challenges that you faced when you sat down to talk about this challenge in building this actual tool and some of the uncertainty that comes with kind of rapidly evolving and also using AI in
Yes.
order to build something?
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot of iteration that had to happen. I mean, look, you've got a technical audience, so
Hmm.
I'm not going to have to explain the concept of a hallucination, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
when we were starting this, we were like the actual underlying tool we were first using was OpenAI's chat completion model. It which was sort of the easiest way to do it. GPT-4 wasn't out yet. I think GPT 3.5 was out, but the performance difference between 3.5 and 3 was not huge for most tasks.
Hmm.
Anyway, one of the challenges initially was, okay, hey, this is doing a pretty good job of answering questions when it does a good job of answering questions. But a lot of the time, it's just, I hesitate to say making stuff up, but more like going a little bit off the rails and kind of veering into territory that's maybe more general knowledge and not actually looking at our content.
Hmm.
So, yeah, maybe like to be more specific, at the time we were starting this, recall augmented generation was a concept, but it was still sort of new and people were still figuring it out. And so there was a lot of actual R&D we had to do to kind of get it to work the way we wanted it to work.
So you're
And
talking RAG, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
so it's a RAG application, which now, I mean, you can just like, I mean, well, actually, I mean, RAG is to some extent built in to, Claude and ChatGPT. But even if you don't, sort of use the basic RAG implementation there, there are, sort of off-the-shelf workflows you can get through Hugging Face and other platforms were not existent at the time. So it was kind of like you're having to sort of figure out alongside everyone else like how to actually use these language models and sort of develop these techniques. And then in addition, like, prompt engineer, of course, so that you try to minimize hallucinations. But kind of the thing I'm actually most proud of is that we came up with some interesting ways of detecting circumstances when the language model is likely to hallucinate. Like
Mm,
where you don't necessarily know until a human reads it,
yeah.
but where we can tease out clues from the response that tell us that actually it's very likely it's hallucinating, so we should actually disregard this answer.
Okay. So
Yeah.
did you have to hire a prompt engineer, or was it something that Billy already had some skills in AI and maybe he was a developer and he could code really well in Python or
Yeah.
JSON or Rust or pick your language, right? Was this a specific search for, okay, we need a prompt engineer, we need him to do ABC? What was that process? And because that's pretty interesting to me, just to, because I hear the next big job, you can make 389,000 and 12
Yeah.
cents by being a prompt engineer. But how easy or how hard is it to be a prompt engineer? I'm supposing it's
Yeah.
very hard to be a prompt engineer.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I don't know about you. I don't hear that very much anymore. I think that was like
Not
always,
anymore. No.
yeah. Yeah, we never thought about hiring a prompt
Okay.
engineer. And we spent a lot of time kind of looking around at what other people were doing. I think
Mm.
maybe this is why this, concept of a professional prompt engineer has mostly gone away, except in some circumstances, is that everyone's just out on LinkedIn and Twitter and, threads just giving away
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
works, right? So,
Hmm. Copy
um,
and paste.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so, we definitely had to experiment, but it was experimentation that our lead engineer wanted to do because it's actually funny. He and I both went on a joint journey together where I was very cynical about AI kind of leading up to 2022. I just saw a lot of people slapping AI all over all sorts of different things. And I was basically on the same page with our lead engineer about that. Like we kind of have like a periodic conversation where we'll be like, hey, are you still I'm oversimplifying, but it was like, hey, are you still kind of not on the AI train? Yeah, yeah, we're not. Okay, cool. We're same page.
Yeah.
And then one day, like, I'll never forget the meeting. It was late 2022, and we both kind of had our like first real chat GPT experience.
Hmm.
And like we had our periodic one-on-one, and we're just like, hey, we've got something to confess. And the other one was like, yeah, me too.
Hmm.
And that was when we just both were like, yeah, this is actually a big deal, and we need to be on top of it. Yeah.
And since we're supposed to be talking about open source and APIs,
Yeah.
just from an open source perspective, so there were several open source tools that you probably played around with, I'm assuming, and then you tried to figure out, okay,
Yep.
well, how do we interface with the LLM or the storage or the data on the back end and send the calls, right? The puts and
Yep.
the gets, and you do all the things, right? And which APIs do we use, right?
Yes.
So walk us down your thought process and maybe some of the conversations or some of the behind the scenes things that you guys had to do.
Yeah. So that was a big topic of conversation. So I mean, I mentioned Hugging Face earlier.
Hmm.
That was something we spent a lot of time looking
And
at.
can you explain Hugging Face? I hear it a lot, but is it just an AI model or
Yeah. So Hugging Face, it's like it's more like an AI framework
okay.
that's it's it's a suite, I guess, an open source suite of tools that allows you to build and run AI applications, right? So Hugging Face is not an LLM provider, but as an example of what you can do, and it's not a vector database, and it's not, any other, it's not an embeddings tool, but
Hmm.
what Hugging Face allows you to do, as an example, is connect a vector database to an embeddings tool and a language model and sort of run the workflows and the data flows where you can actually off the top of my head, I forget if they support every language model out of the box or
Mm,
all the major ones, or if you kind of bring your own. Obviously, it's open source, so you can modify it.
yeah.
But basically, you can use Hugging Face to manage the flows of data between a vector database and an OpenAI or
Okay.
whichever you're using to build a working application. So yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about using it, and we have learned a lot from it, but ultimately that is where we came out, is that there was a lot of knowledge we gained from looking at the code for certain things inside Hugging Face, but we felt that the field is so new and things were changing so rapidly, it wasn't stable enough for us to rely on going forward. We felt like we needed, if we were going to use Hugging Face or any other third-party tool, open or closed source, and then there are some closed source, alternatives as well, that if we were going to use a third-party tool like that, we were kind of creating a dependency where we needed to understand the code anyway
Hmm.
because it was changing so rapidly. And so we really ought to just understand it ourselves and have that expertise in house. That's the conclusion we came to. Other people have made different conclusions, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I think Hugging
Yeah.
Face, as an example, is a great platform, a great framework. But that was our reasoning there, why we came out on the side of building it ourselves.
Okay, everyone. Peter's gonna give us a quick demo of Hugging Face. No, I'm just kidding. It would be cool to see, but
Yeah, no, it is cool. It's
yeah.
cool. And there are some other cool things out there. But one of the crazy things about operating in this space is that like everything changes so fast, and the application that somebody builds today,
Hmm.
right, to do something really advanced using one of these foundational models, you wait a month or 2 months, and very frequently that capability is just built into the model itself.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I'm actually not totally forgetting the name. There was a tool that was kind of like an open source version of Perplexity,
Hmm.
where you could run it in the command line, and it was very experimental and very unstable, but it could combine web search with kind of multi-step reasoning using an LLM. And then Perplexity came out. It's like, well, yeah, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the web and do it. Like, I don't need
Yeah.
to. It's just changing so fast.
Interesting. So, what are some of the trade-offs that you've encountered between using some of these open source models and also relying on third-party APIs for your API or
Yeah, well, so
AI
actually,
needs, right?
yeah. So actually, look, one of the sort of elephant in the room around open source and AI is,
Hmm.
of course, the Llama models as an alternative, and not just Llama, Mistral and other models as an alternative to ChatGPT, to Claude, to Gemini. We are constantly experimenting with them. I'm optimistic about the potential for using open source models over third-party closed source commercial models. I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
The APIs for using ChatGPT or Claude, they're pretty fast, but the way they work, it's like they work to kind of maximize their own GPU utilization. And so they kind of queue them up.
Hmm.
Like it's like you get requests from us and requests from other people who are calling the models through the API, and then it's like when they've got like a full whatever GPU unit of demand, of inference demand, then they'll actually execute your command. And the latency isn't super long; it's usually pretty fast, but it's a
Hmm.
little unpredictable. It's unpredictable enough that like you don't want to use that approach for you know in my experience, like chaining together like 3 to 5 separate calls. It's just the latency gets too long. Running an open source model on your own hardware that you control, where you don't have to queue things up in that way, lets you do sort of these more complex chained reasoning approaches. But the trade-off is then you got to run your own hardware, right? Which is very expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's super, super cheap to just call the OpenAI API as opposed to have a GPU like this, a massive GPU up and running all the time. And then the other thing is that the models so far are just not as good. And the difference is noticeable for now. I think if you ask me in 18 months, we will definitely be running open source models for some of our work, but right now it's not quite there.
Mm, okay. So how does this all work? Is it a SaaS subscription? They purchase $20 a month, or I don't know how it works, but and they take the RFP document, upload it into a web browser or something, and then it goes into the LLM. I'm super simplifying this, and then it takes the information in the document, kind of like what ChatGPT does, and thinks about it from a machine learning perspective, and then says, "Okay, I have all this information. Now, let me give you back what you need in order to answer the questions," or does it answer the questions for you based on all the information that you put into it from your private information? Maybe I shouldn't say private information, but your information, so it could be customized
Yes.
to answer the RFP in the exact way that you want it to be answered with your details, right?
Yeah, your details and also, your tone of
Okay.
voice, all of that. Yeah. No, you
Yeah.
described it almost exactly. That's perfect. I think you're illustrating why there are a number of competitors in this space. It's
Mm,
actually it's pretty straightforward to design what a system like this should do and what it should look like. And I think the only piece that you missed and where we've really focused, and actually where I think a lot of the value comes in the application, is on the collaboration
mm.
piece. And
Okay.
so not something you often think about first when it's like, oh, hey, we've got an AI tool. It's going to like use AI to do everything. I think about it this way. AI models today are probably about as sophisticated as like a smart intern, right? And if you have an army of interns, you can do a lot with them.
Hmm.
But you're never going to let an intern write a document that you're just going to send out to a customer without having somebody more experienced review it,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Hmm.
Uh, and so the collaboration piece is still very important. Like the AI model is very good at doing a first draft. We see look, it depends a lot on the content and the specifics of the RFP and the domain, but we see kind of first answer rates between 70 and 95%. And then, like they will get edited by a human, maybe the ones that are yeah, the ones that are answered will get edited by a human, maybe somewhere between like 15 and 20% of the time.
Hmm.
So, we're talking like over 80% usually initial completion rate, and then about 20% still requiring human input. But even that 80, you're still going to have a human review. And you're still going to want to assign to people who know what they're talking about to actually look at it. And so a lot of our coding has actually gone into building like just nice, easy to use workflows and making it like a good collaboration tool, not just an AI tool.
Okay. So
That makes sense.
collaboration means, because the first thing that pops in my head is like a Google Doc, right?
Yeah.
But you're not really talking that type of collaboration. You're talking the AI. You're collaborating with the AI.
Well, and no, and the human collaboration too.
Oh,
That like,
okay.
like
Okay.
so like look, let me give you an example, right? If like in again, go back to the health insurance RFP example. If there's a question about claims rates, for certain demographics or whatever, it's gonna there might be there might be a numeric answer that the AI comes up with,
Hmm.
but you're gonna have someone in claims look at it, and probably also somebody in legal, and then also the actual salesperson or commercial, the person who has commercial responsibility for the response. And all three of those roles are going to want to have easy access to the answer, to the things that they need to look at themselves, have a clear set of tasks that they got to accomplish,
Hmm. Hmm.
also be able to see who else has looked at this, right? What changes did they make?
Mm, okay.
It's like, the interesting thing that I'm observing now that we have an AI tool, I was thinking when we started this, it's like, oh, this is going to be AI does everything. What I'm noticing is that because the AI is taking out so much of the rote work, there's actually a lot more time available for the humans to actually collaborate on these
Mm,
responses,
okay.
which hopefully improves the quality of the response, but certainly makes it easier for people to actually focus on the things that matter.
And I'm really enjoying the conversation, but time is short here.
Yeah.
Maybe one final shout out from you. Is there any information you'd like to leave? Maybe point someone to your website, or take a look at a blog post or something in particular.
Fastbreakrfp.com, very easy to find us. I'm also very easy to find on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'll not going to shout out any specific content. We're always putting up more stuff on LinkedIn all the time, and just definitely come find us. If you deal with RFPs, I would love to hear from you and actually just kind of learn from you, because I'm not an expert on it.
You sound like an expert to me, but you are to the ones who are not in that space. So Peter, we appreciate we appreciate you.
I'm like a B+.
Here.
B+.
I'm sure you got some smart people on the team who could definitely maybe run circles around you. That's why you hired them, right?
That's the goal.
Yeah. So Peter, thank you again for being a guest here. I do want to let all the listeners know that we are on YouTube now. So please go to YouTube and type Data Protection Gumbo. You will find the channel there. You can watch the episode there. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share it. And also don't forget to subscribe to the LinkedIn backup group. It's called Backup and Recovery Professionals. And we're having similar conversations such as the ones that we're having right here on Data Protection Gumbo. So thank you again. All right.
Thank you, Demetrius.